The twin suns of planet Veryl 9 were rising slowly, painting the dusty colony in shades of red and gold. It was John's first day at his new job, a maintenance engineer for the colony's power grid. He had traveled light years from Earth to find work here, hoping for peace and purpose. But he had no idea that this day would change his life forever. The streets were already busy with workers, machines, and alien traders shouting in strange tongues. The air smelled of rust, smoke, and something sweet but rotten. John walked carefully, holding his small tool bag close. He noticed how poor and broken the place looked. Buildings made of metal sheets, children with glowing eyes watching from corners, and hungry faces hiding in the shadows. As he reached the market square, he stopped for a moment, trying to find the office where he was supposed to report. But before he could move again, he heard a weak, trembling voice behind him. Human. Please, wait. John turned around and saw her, an alien woman with pale blue skin and long dark hair. Her clothes were torn and dirty, her arms thin like sticks. Beside her stood a small girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, clutching a broken toy made of wire. Both looked frightened and tired. The woman took a shaky step closer, her golden eyes shining with tears. Please, human. I'll do anything for work. Even if I must sleep with you, she said. Her voice cracked with shame for a moment. John thought he had misheard her. The noise of the crowd around him faded. All he could hear was the sound of his own heartbeat. Nearby, some traders stopped talking, their heads turning toward them. Whispers filled the air. John blinked, trying to find the right words. What did you just say? He asked softly, not angry, just shocked. The woman dropped to her knees, dust rising around her. Her small daughter pulled her arm, whispering, Mama, no. But the woman couldn't stop crying. Please, human. They won't hire me. No one will. I just need food for my child, she said, her voice breaking with every word. John's throat tightened. He could see the pain in her eyes, not lust or manipulation, only pure desperation. Her hands were rough, her face covered in dust and her body trembling from hunger. He had seen poverty before, but never like this. Never someone offering herself just for a meal. He looked down at the child who was staring up at him with big, scared eyes, her small stomach growling. She looked too weak even to stand. John felt something deep inside him shift, an ache, a kind of silent anger at a world so cruel. He slowly bent down, his voice calm and kind. Stand up, he said. The woman looked confused. You don't want me? John shook his head. No, I don't want that, he said. But I can find you work, real work. The market went quiet again. People were watching, some mocking smiles, others whispering cruel things, but John ignored them. He reached into his bag and took out a water flask. Handing it to her, drink, he said. She hesitated, her eyes wide, as if kindness itself was something dangerous, but she took the flask slowly and drank, her hands shaking, then gave it to her child, who drank greedily. John watched quietly. His heart heavy, he asked softly, What's your name? She wiped her mouth and said, Lyra. And this is my daughter, Miri. I'm John, he said. I just started working here today. Lyra lowered her eyes. Then you don't know how things are here, human. They call us dust people. They say we should die in the slums. John frowned. Not while I'm here, he said firmly. Come, I'll talk to my supervisor. Maybe we can find something for you. Lyra looked at him as if she couldn't believe it. You'd help me without taking something from me? Yes, John said simply. No one should live like this. As they walked through the narrow alleys toward the power station, people whispered behind them, The human's taking her. He'll regret it. She's just using him. But John didn't listen. He had made up his mind at the gate of the station. The guard stopped him. Hey, no aliens allowed, he barked. John's tone turned sharp. She's with me. She needs work, the guard sneered. What is she gonna do? Beg? John stepped closer, his eyes hard. She's going to work, same as anyone else. The guard looked at him, then laughed and let them pass. Fine, but it's your mess. Human. Lyra walked beside him silently, her daughter holding her hand, her steps slow and unsure. When they entered the small equipment room, John turned to her and said, You can clean tools here, keep things in order. I'll pay you from my first week's wages until we make it official. Lyra gasped, her voice shaking. You'd give your pay to me? John smiled, tired but sincere. No, not to you, he said. To both of you. The little girl hid her face shyly, clutching her mother's skirt for the first time that day. Lyra's eyes filled not with tears of fear but of hope. And John knew his first day on Viral 9 had already become something far bigger than just a job. It was the beginning of something that would change 2 lives and maybe an entire world. The next morning, the sky over Viral 9 looked dull and heavy. Gray clouds moved across the twin suns, making the colony seem even sadder than before. John woke early and walked toward the old worker district, his boots crushing dry dust on the ground in his hand. He carried a small bag filled with food rations and water packs. He couldn't stop thinking about the alien woman from yesterday, Lyra and her little girl. Miri, her face full of fear and pride mixed together. No one deserved to live like that, especially not a mother and child. He wanted to understand why this world had become so broken. When he reached the edge of the colony, he found a place that looked forgotten by time. Rusty metal homes, broken power lines, and the smell of burned plastic in the air. It wasn't a neighborhood, it was a graveyard for the poor. Children with thin faces watched him from behind walls. Some ran away. Others just stared. An old alien man sitting on a broken crate said, "You're lost, human. This place is not for your kind." John nodded politely and said, "I'm looking for Lyra and her daughter." The old man looked at him strangely and pointed down a narrow path. "End of the row, but don't expect much. She lost everything." John followed the path until he reached a small hut made of metal sheets and old wires. There was no door, just a hanging cloth inside. He could hear soft coughing and the quiet sound of a child trying to sing. He lifted the cloth gently and looked inside. Lyra sat beside a small metal stove, trying to heat a piece of dry bread. Her eyes widened when she saw him. "John?" she said in surprise. "You came here?" John smiled faintly. "I said you'd have work," he said. "But I also brought something for you." He placed the bag on the floor and opened it. Inside were bread, dried fruits, and clean water packs. Lyra froze, her eyes filling with tears again. "No one has ever done this for us," she whispered. Miri crawled closer, her small hands reaching for the food. John smiled and handed her a fruit. The girl bit it carefully, then looked up with a shy smile that melted his heart. As they ate, John looked around the small shelter. It was dark, cold, and empty except for 2 old blankets and a small metal box. He asked quietly, "You used to work before?" Lyra nodded. "Yes, in the solar factory near the ridge before humans came." "What happened?" he asked. She looked down, her voice trembling. "When your people bought the factories, they closed half of them. Said alien labor was too weak. They kept only the humans. We lost our jobs, our homes. Everything." John felt a deep sadness inside. He had heard rumors about unfair treatment in the colonies, but seeing it with his own eyes hit different. Lyra continued, "I tried to find work again, but they all said no. Some offered things I couldn't give," she said, her hands shaking. "I would rather starve than sell my body." John clenched his fists. "No one should have to make that choice," he said firmly. Lyra looked at him carefully. "You don't speak like most humans." "I'm not like most," he said quietly. "I didn't come here to look down on others." A soft wind blew through the cracks, carrying the sound of crying from another house nearby. The whole district felt like a wounded heart. Forgotten by the world, John stood up, his face set. "I'll help you fix this place," he said. Lyra shook her head. "You can't fix a broken world." "Human," John smiled faintly. "Maybe not. But I can start with one home." He went outside, found old wires and metal plates lying nearby, and began repairing the cracks in her wall. Lyra watched in silence, unable to understand why this stranger would care so much. Miri brought him small tools and laughed softly when he thanked her. The sound of her laughter was like a spark of life in the dead air. By evening, the hut looked stronger. The wind no longer cut through it. John wiped sweat from his forehead. "That should hold for now," he said. Lyra stepped closer, holding a piece of cloth. She dipped it in water and gently wiped the dirt from his hands. "You're strange, human," she said softly. "Most would never even step here." John looked at her and smiled. "Maybe that's why I should." The suns were setting, painting the sky in deep orange light. Lyra's daughter fell asleep in her mother's arms, her small face peaceful for the first time in days. Lyra whispered, "Thank you, John, for giving us hope again." He nodded, looking at the small home now glowing in the last rays of light. As he turned to leave, he said, "Be ready tomorrow, Lyra. There's work waiting." She watched him walk away into the fading light, and for the first time since the war ended, she felt something she thought she had lost forever: hope. The next morning, the colony was already alive with noise. Engines roared, Traders shouted and the smell of oil filled the air. John walked through the dusty street with a purpose. He had a small plan in his mind, a simple promise he had made, to himself, to never let Lyra and her daughter go hungry again. When he reached the power station, a few human workers looked at him with smirks. One of them, a big man named Harris, crossed his arms and said, "Heard you picked up a pet alien, John. Didn't waste much time, huh?" The others laughed cruelly, but John didn't respond. He simply walked past them, his jaw tight, his silence louder than any words. He went straight to the storage room and started organizing the old equipment. He knew Lyra would be there soon. He wanted her first day to go right. A few hours later, the door opened slowly, and Lyra stepped inside, wearing an old gray cloak and holding Miri's hand. She looked nervous, unsure if she truly belonged there. John smiled and said, "You came." Lyra nodded softly. "You asked me to." Miri peeked from behind her mother's leg, clutching a small metal flower she had made from scrap. She handed it shyly to John. He took it gently and smiled. "It's beautiful, thank you," he said. John showed Lyra the tools, explaining in simple words, "You just need to clean and check these each day, make sure they're in order." Lyra nodded, eager to learn. Her thin hands moved carefully, wiping dust, checking handles, organizing boxes by size. At first, the other workers whispered and laughed from afar, calling her names, but John ignored them. He stayed near her, teaching her patiently. By midday, he offered her some food from his lunchbox. "You should eat," he said. Lyra shook her head. "It's yours." He smiled slightly. "I already ate." He lied, knowing he hadn't. She hesitated, then accepted the food, breaking it into 2 pieces and giving one to Miri, her eyes soft with motherly love. Hours passed, and for the first time, John saw her smile, just a small, quiet smile, but real. He felt a warmth in his chest, not of romance, but something deeper, a quiet respect. Lyra wasn't weak. She was strong, stronger than most. She had just been crushed by a cruel world. As the day ended, the supervisor, a strict man named Ven, entered the storage room, his eyes sharp. "John, what's this alien doing here?" John turned to face him calmly. "She's working, under my responsibility." Ven scoffed. "You can't hire aliens without approval." John's tone stayed firm. "Then take it from my pay." The supervisor frowned. "You'll regret this. Human kindness doesn't last long out here," John replied. "Maybe, but it starts somewhere." Ven shook his head and walked away, muttering, "Foolish Earthman." When the room grew quiet again, Lyra looked at John, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You risked your job for me?" John nodded simply. "I told you you'll work for me, but not the way you feared." Lyra's hands trembled as she whispered, "Why? Why would you do this for someone like me?" He paused, his gaze thoughtful. "Because someone once did it for me." He didn't tell her the full story, but years ago, back on Earth, during a mining collapse, he had been trapped underground for days. It was a stranger, a refugee worker who saved him, risking his life. That act of kindness had never left John, and now on this alien world, he wanted to pass it forward. As the sun began to set, John packed the tools and said, "Come tomorrow again. You've done good work." Lyra smiled faintly, her voice soft. "You treat me like I matter." "You do," he said. "Everyone does. Someone just needs to remind the rest." Outside, the colony lights began to flicker, the streets glowing with dull red lamps. Miri tugged at John's sleeve, whispering, "Thank you, human." John bent down and smiled. "It's John," he said. "No need for human anymore." The little girl giggled softly, her voice sweet and innocent. As they walked away, Lyra turned once more and said, "You've given me work, food, and respect. What do I give in return?" John looked up at the stars above them. "Just promise me one thing," he said. "What?" she asked quietly. "Don't give up again," he said. "Not on yourself, not on your daughter." That night, Lyra couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about his words, about his strange kindness. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not as a beggar, not as a burden, but as a person. She held Miri close and whispered. The human kept his promise. And outside, in the distance, the lights of the colony glowed brighter than usual, as if the world itself had heard that promise too. The following week, whispers began to spread through the colony like cold wind through metal walls. People talked in hushed voices whenever John walked by. Some laughed quietly. Others stared with judging eyes. That Earthman, they said. He's protecting that alien woman. Maybe he wants her. Maybe she's paying him with favors. John didn't care about the rumors, but he could feel their weight every time he entered the workshop. The laughter behind his back, the sharp eyes watching him. Even some of his friends began to avoid him. The price of kindness was loneliness, and he felt it growing each day. Lyra noticed too. She worked silently, her shoulders tense, her head lowered. They hate me, she whispered once. I hear what they say about you because of me. John stopped tightening a bolt and looked at her. Let them talk, he said calmly. Words don't build power grids, actions do. But his smile couldn't hide the tiredness in his eyes. One afternoon, while they were fixing the old generator, a group of human workers came in laughing loudly. Harris was among them, holding a metal mug of synth beer. Hey, John, he called out. You planning to marry your alien maid? The men laughed. John kept working, silent, but Harris stepped closer, his breath thick with alcohol. Come on, human hero, admit it, you like her, she's your little pet now. Before anyone could react, John dropped his wrench and turned sharply, his voice cold. Say one more word, Harris, and you'll be picking your teeth from the floor. The laughter died. The men backed off and Harris stumbled out muttering curses. Lyra stood frozen, her eyes wide. You shouldn't fight for me, she said quietly. John sighed. I don't fight for you, Lyra. I fight against cruelty. But things grew worse. That night when John returned to his small living quarters, he found the door scratched and the walls painted with red letters. Traitor of humans. Someone had thrown trash and broken glass outside his door. He stood silently for a long time. His jaw clenched, his heart heavy. The next morning, Lyra came early to work and saw the mess. She said nothing, only took a cloth and started cleaning the paint, her hands trembling, her tears falling silently. John found her there and stopped her. Don't, he said softly. It's not your fault. But it is, she said through tears. You lost your friends because of me. John shook his head. I didn't lose anything worth keeping. Later that day, Miri came running into the workshop, coughing hard, her face pale, her small body shaking. Lyra dropped her tools and caught her in her arms, panic flooding her face. She's burning up, she cried. She has the fever again. John felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard about this illness, the alien fever that spread in the slums. Deadly if left untreated. He lifted the child into his arms. We're going to the medical base, he said firmly. Lyra tried to stop him. They won't treat her, not there. They'll turn us away. I don't care, he said, already moving. Let them try. They ran through the rain-drenched streets toward the human medical base at the edge of the colony. Guards stepped forward, blocking the gate. No aliens allowed, you know the rule, one said, pointing a rifle. John's voice thundered. She's dying, she needs medicine. Then take her to your kind. The guard sneered. John stepped closer, his eyes full of fire. Then shoot me too, because I'm not leaving without her. The guards hesitated, unsure. Their orders clear, but their hearts uncertain. Then one recognized him. That's the engineer from Earth, the one who fixed the base reactor last month, he whispered. After a long silence, the gate opened. 5 minutes, the guard said coldly. John rushed inside with Lyra, shouting for the med droids. The machine scanned the child and began treatment. For hours, John and Lyra waited in the cold hallway, sitting side by side, silent. When the medic finally returned, he said, She'll live. The fever broke. Lyra covered her face, sobbing with relief. John leaned back, exhausted. Told you, he said quietly. She's strong, just like her mother. When they left the base, the rain had stopped, and the first light of dawn touched the wet streets. Lyra turned to him and whispered, "You risked everything again. For me." "For her?" John looked up at the pale sunrise and said, "If helping others cost me everything, then it's still worth the price." And though the colony still whispered behind his back, though the walls still carried cruel words, a few pairs of alien eyes began to watch him differently. Not with fear, not with doubt, but with silent respect. They started calling him something new. The human who stood alone. And for the first time, a change, small but real, began to stir inside the broken colony of Veryl 9. The storm had not stopped for 2 days. The colony sky turned black and yellow, lightning flashing between the twin suns' clouds. John sat beside Lyra and Mary inside their small shelter near the factory. The rain beat against the metal roof like falling stones. Mary was still weak, but her fever was gone and she was sleeping peacefully beside her mother. John looked at them quietly. He had faced many storms in his life, but this one felt different. It was not just a weather storm. It was the storm of people's hatred. Since the night he carried Mary through the medical base, the rumors had exploded. Posters had appeared on walls calling him alien lover. His supervisor refused to speak to him. His pay was delayed. Some even threw waste at him when he passed through the streets. Still, he came every day to work. He fixed machines, trained Lyra, helped others. He smiled even when people mocked him. But inside, something heavy grew in his chest, the cost of doing what was right. That morning, when he walked into the power station, silence fell. Harris, the man who once mocked him, stepped forward again, this time with anger instead of laughter. "You made us all look weak," Harris shouted. "Now aliens think they can stand equal to us." John looked at him steadily. "I didn't make anyone weak," he said calmly. "I made one child live." Harris pushed him hard. "You think you're a hero? You're a traitor to your own kind." John caught his balance, his jaw tightening. "If saving lives makes me a traitor," he said, "then I'll wear that name with pride." The supervisor, Venn, appeared from his office, his eyes cold. "Enough," he barked. "John, you're suspended until further notice. You've caused too much attention." The workers behind Harris smirked, satisfied. John said nothing, just turned, collected his things, and walked out under the pouring rain. Outside, Lyra was waiting for him under a small shelter, holding an umbrella made of old metal sheets. "You've lost your job," she whispered. "Because of us." John looked at her and smiled faintly. "No," he said, "because of them." She frowned, confused. "Them?" "The ones who fear what's right," he said softly. That night, John sat in silence near the small fire inside Lyra's hut. Mary was drawing in the dust with a stick, a drawing of a human and 2 aliens holding hands. Lyra looked at him across the fire. "Why don't you go back to your people?" she asked quietly. "You don't belong here anymore." John stared at the flames. "Maybe I never really did," he said. "Earth had rules too. People who said who deserves help and who doesn't. I left to find freedom. Maybe I found it here, even if it cost me everything." Lyra's voice broke softly. "You gave me work, respect, food, and my daughter's life, and you lost everything for it." John shook his head, smiling faintly. "I didn't lose, I traded. I traded comfort for purpose." Outside, the storm finally began to fade. The sound of rain turned soft like whispers. In that quiet, a small knock echoed at the door. Lyra stood up, opening it carefully. 2 alien men stood there, their faces thin but determined. One spoke. "We heard what you did for Lyra's child. You defied the humans for one of us." John rose slowly. "I didn't do it for sides," he said. "I did it for people." The men exchanged glances. "We want to help," they said. "There are more like us, widows, children, workers with no home. If you build something, we'll stand with you." John looked at Lyra. She nodded slowly, a small smile forming on her lips. "You see?" she whispered. Hope spreads faster than hate. By dawn, word had spread through the slums. Dozens of aliens came forward carrying tools, scrap metal, broken machines. With John's guidance, they began to rebuild the abandoned solar factory. Piece by piece, the machines hummed again. They worked together, aliens and the one human who had chosen kindness over power. But the price of kindness had not ended. Across the colony, the trade guild noticed. They didn't like what they saw. Aliens uniting. A human leading them. John could feel it coming. The next storm. one not made of rain but of power and politics. Yet when he looked at Lyra and Miri, standing in the first light of dawn, he felt no fear. He only thought of one thing. If a single act of compassion could rebuild a life, then perhaps it could rebuild a world too. And as the factory doors opened once more, the sign above it flickered to life. Hope Foundry. It was small, rusty, and crooked, but it shined brighter than anything else on Veryl 9. The morning sun rose weak and golden over the colony of Veryl 9. For the first time in months, the air smelled of metal and oil, not decay. The old solar factory, once a hollow shell of broken machines, now echoed with the sound of hammers welding sparks and voices filled with purpose. John stood near the main door, his clothes dirty, his hands covered in grease. Yet he smiled as he watched aliens and a few brave humans work side by side. The place that once represented despair was now alive with hope. On the front gate, the new hand-painted sign read, Hope Foundry. Lyra walked toward him carrying a box of tools. She wore a faded worker's coat, her blue skin marked by light streaks of dust. Her daughter, Miri, followed close behind, holding a small lunchbox for her mother. You really did it, human, Lyra said softly. You turned ruins into life. John chuckled, tightening a bolt. No, he said, we did it. You all did. Everywhere he looked, something was changing. Alien mothers operated sorting belts. Orphaned teens checked energy cells. A young human apprentice trained under Lyra, learning how to fix micropanels. For once, work didn't care about species, only effort. But not everyone celebrated their success. The Trade Guild, the organization that ruled the colony's economy, was furious. Their factories made profit from keeping aliens desperate. They couldn't allow Hope Foundry to become a symbol of freedom. That afternoon, 3 guild officers arrived in black uniforms. Their hovercraft stopped at the gate with a hiss. The workers fell silent. The lead officer, a tall alien with silver skin and cold red eyes, stepped forward. Who's in charge here? He demanded. John wiped his hands and stepped up. I am. The officer's eyes narrowed. This factory is illegal. You have no permit to operate. Shut it down. John's tone stayed calm. We don't need your permit to feed our families. The officer smirked. You will when the guild cuts your power and water. Lyra stepped forward, trembling but brave. You've taken enough from us. You closed our jobs, our homes. This factory is ours. You can't stop us. The officer glared at her. Watch your tongue, alien. John's voice turned sharp. Don't talk to her like that. The tension grew thick. Everyone in the factory stopped working. The officer looked around, seeing dozens of eyes, alien and human, staring back at him, united in silence. For the first time, he felt outnumbered. He turned and said coldly, Enjoy your dream while it lasts. The guild will return. Then he and his guards left. When they were gone, Lyra looked at John, her voice shaking. They'll come back with soldiers. John nodded slowly. Then we'll be ready, he said. That night, the factory glowed like a beacon under the stars. The workers stayed late, reinforcing doors, checking power cells, sharing food. Music hummed from a small radio, the laughter of children mixing with the sound of welding sparks. In a quiet corner, Miri handed John a small gift, a pendant made from a broken gear. For you, she said, because you fixed us. John smiled warmly and placed it around his neck. No, little one, he said gently. You fixed me. Hours later, when most had gone home, John and Lyra stood at the balcony overlooking the sleeping factory. Below them, the lights from the machines flickered like stars. Do you think this will last? Lyra asked softly. John looked at the glowing floor below, then at her. If it's built on fear, it will fall. But this is built on kindness, and kindness is harder to break. A soft wind brushed past them, carrying the faint sound of laughter from the night shift. For a moment, everything felt peaceful, like the world itself had paused to breathe. But far away, beyond the colony's hills, the guild's council was already in session. Angry voices filled the hall. That human is dangerous, one said. He's uniting them. Another snarled. Then we make an example out of him. Back in the colony, unaware of the storm rising, John closed the factory gates, looking up at the twin moons above. He whispered quietly to himself, Let them come. Hope doesn't burn that easily. And as the factory lights glowed through the night, the people of Veryl 9, human and alien alike, slept with something they had not felt in years: safety, purpose, and hope that tomorrow might truly be theirs. Dawn arrived quietly over Veril 9, painting the sky with soft silver light. The Hope Foundry stood tall against the morning fog, its chimneys breathing warm smoke, its machines humming like a heartbeat. To most in the colony, it had become more than a factory. It was a sign that even in darkness, something good could still grow. John stood outside the main gate, drinking from a metal cup of tea, watching workers arrive one by one. Some greeted him with smiles, others bowed their heads slightly in respect. A few months ago, he had been an outcast. Now the same people who once threw words like stones greeted him as Engineer John, the man who changed their world. Inside, Lyra was teaching a group of young aliens how to repair solar panels. Her hands moved quickly, her voice calm and confident. She no longer trembled when speaking. Her posture was strong. She had become a leader without ever meaning to be one. Miri ran around the factory, carrying messages between workers, her laughter echoing through the halls like sunlight. But beneath all that peace, danger was crawling closer. By noon, dark vehicles from the Trade Guild appeared on the horizon. Dozens of guards in black armor marched toward the factory. The colony's streets fell silent as people watched them pass. The guild had returned, and this time they weren't coming to talk. John saw the convoy from the roof. "They're here," he said quietly. Lyra joined him, her eyes steady. "What will they do?" John sighed, tightening his gloves. "They'll try to shut us down. Maybe worse?" Lyra looked toward the workers below. "Then we won't run." Within minutes, hundreds of aliens and humans stood together at the factory gates, forming a living wall. Mothers, fathers, children, all holding tools, rods, and banners made from scrap metal. On each banner, the same message was painted in white: "We work together or we fall alone." The guild commander stepped forward, shouting through a megaphone, "This facility is illegal. Disperse immediately or we'll use force." John walked forward through the crowd, stopping only a few meters from the commander. His voice was calm but strong. "You already used force, and for years. You starved them. You banned them. You called them less than people. Not today." The commander raised his hand to signal the troops, but before he could give the order, hundreds more people began to emerge from the side streets. Miners, merchants, mechanics, humans and aliens alike. They marched toward the factory, joining the line. Some carried torches, others carried spare tools. The commander looked around, realizing too late that the crowd now outnumbered his guards 10 to 1. Lyra stepped forward beside John, her voice clear and fierce. "You want to stop us? Then you'll have to stop everyone." The soldiers hesitated. They weren't facing rebels with weapons. They were facing workers with unity. The commander's radio crackled, a voice shouting from the guild headquarters. "Stand down. Public support is spreading. We can't afford a riot." Anger flashed in his eyes, but he had no choice. He turned to John. "You think you've won, human?" John shook his head. "Not won. Just begun." The guild forces retreated under the watch of thousands. When the last vehicle disappeared into the dust, the crowd erupted into cheers. People hugged, cried, shouted, and laughed. Miri jumped into John's arms, her small hands around his neck. "We did it!" she shouted. That evening, the factory lights burned brighter than ever before. Lanterns hung from the roof, music played from an old radio, and everyone shared food. Humans and aliens sitting together under one roof. For the first time, Veril 9 didn't feel like a divided colony. It felt like home. Lyra approached John near the balcony, her eyes soft with gratitude. "When I met you," she said quietly, "I offered you myself out of shame. I thought I was worthless, but you gave me work, respect, and dignity. You gave my daughter a future." John looked at her gently. "You gave me something too, Lyra. You reminded me what it means to be human." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe we both found what we were searching for." As they stood together watching the workers celebrate, twin moons rose over the horizon, their light bathing the factory in silver glow. John whispered, "We started with nothing but kindness, and it became something stronger than power." Lyra nodded. "Hope." From that day, Hope Foundry became the heart of the colony, a place where species worked together, where children laughed again, where no one had to beg for survival. And across the stars, traders and travelers spoke of a human who gave up everything not for profit, not for fame, but for something far greater. They called him the human who gave dignity, not desire, and in the soft hum of the rebuilt machines, the story of his kindness kept living, proof that one act of compassion could outshine an empire's cruelty, and that sometimes the greatest currency in the galaxy wasn't credits, but hope.